we're now going to look at how we make our wrist strap. Now, how long you make your wrist strap really depends. It's a personal preference. I've got big hands, so I like a longer wrist strap. This is 18.5 inches long, and this is what will suit my hand. Now, I'm going to be making a 3/4 inch wrist strap because I've used a 3/4 inch D-ring on my connector, which I haven't yet put on. So I've made I've cut my strip 3 inches wide. If you're making a 1/2 inch wrist strap, you need to make it 2 inches wide. I've drawn a line centrally down the middle, and I've added some double-sided tape, but I've left the double-sided tape approximately an inch and a half away from either end. So I'm just going to take the white bit off the double-sided tape, and I'm going to fold the raw edges, wrong sides together, into the centre, into that mark that we made centrally down. Now, obviously, this is a 3-inch strap, a 3-inch wide strap, so the central mark is an inch and a half away from either of the edges. If you're doing a 1/2 inch strap, then your central line will need to be 1 inch away from either of the edges. So just fold it in and push it down. And I'm not a massive fan of double-sided tape, but for this particular part, it's perfect. It does exactly what you need it to do. If you don't like double-sided tape, or you haven't got double-sided tape, you could use Fabri-Tac glue, would be perfectly fine. You'd probably need to clip it until the glue was dry so that it didn't unping, because faux leather's got a nasty habit of pinging open again. Now, you could actually make your wrist strap in fabric if you wanted to match your lining. And I'm making mine in a coordinating. So I've got sort of a pale cream beigey colour on here. So I'm going to, oh, it looks like I'm running out of juice. So I'm just going to plug my phone in. Sorry, a bit wiggly, makes you feel a bit seasick. So I'm just going to keep pushing those sides in, both sides, so that the two raw edges butt up against each other in the middle. So, oh, what have I just dropped? A D-ring. So you can see that the end bits there are not actually stuck down, but the centre part is. Now I'm just going to carefully just kind of fold that in half and thread my hardware, so my swivel clip, onto that strap. I'm going to pop it sort of centrally along the strap. Now I'm going to take my two ends of my strap, and that's why we haven't put the tape right up into the end, and I'm going to lay them together, but I'm going to offset them at 90 degrees. So I think you can see that. So that's basically one side is going one way and one side is going the other. Make sure that your strap is not twisted. Let's just pop a clip in just to hold the short ends along to the long side of my strap. And then I'm going to open up this side, and so that short end is on this long side of that strap. I'm just opening that up a little bit more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from this corner to the same point where the other one meets at the bottom. So basically that's from this corner to 3 inches down this side. Now you can mark it if you want to, or you can just stitch it, and I am just going to stitch it. Reduce my stitch length a little bit. you don't feel confident just stitching from corner to corner, then do mark a line so that you've got a stitch line marked out. I can take those clips off, and I'm just going to cut off that triangle at the end there, leaving approximately 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to open that up, that seam allowance, and I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to do that from the inside because it's easier for me to do from the inside, either side of that seam allowance, holding the seam allowance open, and I'm just going to stitch 1/8 of an inch away from my seam that I've actually created. So just open it up with your fingers and stitch all the way across. And then do exactly the same. Let's get rid of my threads. On the other side of the seam allowance. This will hold that seam allowance out of the way. It will make sure that your wrist strap is a little bit thinner. You don't want any bulky lumps in your wrist strap. Now if you do it from the inside, make sure that the thread you have in your bobbin is what you want to see on the outside. I've got green thread in my bobbin, so as I have on the top, so it doesn't really matter whether I do it from the front or the back. So there we go, that's our two ends of our strap joined together. Now we're going to go back in, and we're going to, where we did that join, we're going to just press down the sides of our strap onto that double-sided tape again. Now this is a bit fiddly, but it means that you have a really nice continuous strap. So now we have a sort of a circle with our piece of hardware on, but you can see that doesn't really look very good because it's not fitting. So we have to fold our strap in half at this point. So all of the raw edges are then caught inside of our wristlet. So just go round the circle, folding those two sides together. Matching them up and popping clips in to make sure that everything stays where you want it to stay. Now by joining our strap at an angle in that way, what we end up with is a sort of a mitered join, which means we don't have a really thick area to have to go through. I mean, a 4-fold strap for some people is actually quite a challenge on some of the lighter weight domestic machines. And if you've got a big lump where you've joined two pieces together, it's even more of a challenge because this is offset. You can see on the inside, there's the join, but it comes round, and the join on the other side is actually an inch away from the first bit on the inside. So it gives you a less bulk to have to sew through. Right, so now we have this circle with all these clips on, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew, and I like to do this from inside of the circle, all the way around the circle. You're going to need to make sure that your piece of hardware is out of the way. Now I like to make sure my hardware is behind where I start stitching. So I am going to I'm actually going to move my hardware because I want to start my stitching at the point where I have that join. So I'm just going to move that. So that my hardware, I think you can see there, the hardware is just behind the join. And I'm going to put my strap underneath my needle And you're going to be stitching round on the inside of your circle effectively. And I'm going to do, just going to lengthen my stitch a touch. I'm going to do one stitch backwards and forwards just to secure my stitching. So one forwards, one backwards, and then I'm going to top stitch around the outside of my wrist strap using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I'm just going to kind of thread my circle of faux leather through the machine. It's quite difficult to see because this part is kind of in the way. I don't know if there's a better angle, but if I move that, you can see I'm actually stitching on the inside of my circle of faux leather. It won't stay down, and I kind of need to use both hands to keep it straight. Don't do this quickly. This is not something that you can do at speed. You need to do it slowly, removing the clips as you go. Don't take your clips off too early either, because if you take your clips off too early, it'll all kind of come apart on itself and you'll be swearing, because that's what happens to me. I'm starting to come around to where our hardware is again. Remember, our hardware was behind the needle to start with, and now it's in front of our needle. So what we can do is we can just slide the hardware out of the way so that it's beyond the point where we started our stitching. And you get back to where you started, and I'm just going to move my hardware again. Just one back stitch to finish your stitching, and trim off your thread ends. And then we're going to do exactly the same on the other side. So again, I like to start on that seam where we've got that join. And the only reason I start there is because that's the thickest area. So one back stitch at the beginning, and we're going to go all the way around. It's easier to go this one because you don't actually have to worry about taking the clips off. And again, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you can see we're kind of going on the inside of the circle. I'm just going to move the hardware out of the way. And again, moving the hardware out of the way until you get back to the point where you started. And just bring the hardware out of the way again. And just back stitch to finish your stitching. Trim off any threads. Turn your strap in the right way, whichever way is to be fair, there's no right or wrong way with this. I like to then fold my strap so that my join is approximately 1 inch away from my hardware, and I'm just going to pop a clip in that, because all we're going to do now is do some rivets. Now, I can't show you rivets on the video because if I try and do rivets and I use hand tools, everything jumps all over the place. So I'm going to go and grab my rivets and I'll show you what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to actually put the rivets in.